the objective is always to figure out what is the lowest possible home price that I can find with the highest amount of rental demand. Like right before that cusp of where the rental demand starts to fall off, or the home is not have the things that it needs to have to be able to drive revenue.
Hello and welcome to Pillars of Wealth Creation, where we talk about creating financial success with a special focus on business and real estate. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. Now, let's get to it. Well, welcome back to Pillars of Wealth Creation. I'm your host, Todd Dexheimer. With me, excited to have John Bianchi. John, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate you joining us on the show. And John is the owner of STR Search, known as the Airbnb Data Guy. He's revolutionized short-term rentals with this data-driven approach to finding high-performing properties. And of course, if you want a vacation rental, an Airbnb, a short-term rental, having the right data to find the right property is always, in my opinion, the most important part, because man, it feels daunting out there. I've not spent a ton of time looking for short-term rentals, but I've been looking a little bit lately, thinking about it. And it's like, how do I know if this thing's actually going to make me money or not? So John, with that said, why don't you give our listeners a bit more about your background and we'll dive into the show.
Definitely sounds good. I appreciate it. I'll give the background, but just want to start off by saying that I'm really happy that you're looking into short-term rentals, because now I'm gonna pick your brain. I'll try and give as much advice. I'll give as much advice as I possibly can.
Yeah,
I'm more of an analyst than anything else, and so I like to try and like figure out people's situation and see how I can help.
love it.
Okay, so the quick story here is I became the Airbnb data guy about 3 years ago, but I've been doing Airbnb since 2017. Before that, I was a financial advisor. I was 24 years old, managing $10 million. Hated the day-to-day, so I was looking for something different to do. I liked Airbnb because Airbnb was in the vacation world, and I love travel, and travel is fun. And so to be a part of that every single day, it was exciting for me. Built up a portfolio out of Chicago between, doing rental arbitrage, which I do not recommend to anyone anymore, and property management as well. And then I built up a portfolio of about 15 properties. I had a couple down in Scottsdale, a couple over in Michigan, and uh, COVID wiped it out. So COVID just completely got rid of that entire thing. And so from there, I had to figure out what I was going to do next. And the one thing I realized that I did really, really well with the portfolio that I built up, was analyzing Airbnb data and knowing which property to get, which one not to get. And I wanted to hone in on that skill and get really good at it. And so I applied myself to a couple different jobs out there. And the one that ended up hiring me was TechVestor. And TechVestor at the time had about 5 properties. They are now the largest short-term rental investment fund in America. They have over 150 properties within the past 2.5, 3 years. I've helped them identify 145 of those. And every single last one of those properties is a profitable property. So we have not missed with them. It got to the point where I had built up the skill well. I had got a lot of proof behind me so that I felt confident analyzing this data and knowing what I was doing. And I got to the point where I could actually find more properties than they could actually purchase, because they're, raising money to be able to buy these properties. And so I broke my exclusivity contract with them to be able to open up STR Search, which is a company that helps individuals be able to identify properties to purchase that would be strong, cash flowing, profitable short-term rentals. And we've been doing that for about 15 months now. It's been going really well. I still work with TechVestor, work with other funds as well. But yeah, that's the day to day. I love the space. I wanted to get really good at something. I got really good at data, and I wanted to prove it to myself. I was able to prove it to myself. We still have a perfect track record with 210 plus acquisitions in 3 years. So so far so good. But that's the quick backstory.
That's great. I'm glad you explained the backstory, because that is a perfect way for people who are wanting to get going in any kind of business, whether it's real estate, whether it's a tech company. It doesn't matter what it is. If you want to start a business, you literally built something that helped this company become really successful, and then you took that concept out into the real world. It's for everybody to now be able to take advantage of. But you're learning and you're making mistakes and you're improving on the data and the research through a different company, right? And that is a great way. I think many people discount it. Everybody wants to jump right in, and they don't want to work for somebody else. And I just think so many people discount how huge of a learning environment that is. Mentorship. I mean, I'm sure you learned a lot from this group on what they're looking for and why that's important and all that kind of stuff. And so that's cool. I'm glad you gave us that background.
I'm ac- I'm actually glad you brought that piece up because I actually hate saying that I got a job. Like
Yeah.
as an entrepreneur, it just like hurts my stomach, you
Yeah.
know what I mean? Because before that, as from the age of like 21 till whenever I was, started there, I was working for myself the entire time. But I had a friend who told me they're like, you know, if you want to get really good at something, like you can work for somebody and get really, really good at it and then like build from there. And
Yep.
I really, really respected this guy a lot. He's a brilliant guy. And so I was just at a point where I was like, I'm gonna take that advice. I'm gonna try and get really good at this thing, even though I thought I was pretty good at it at the time. You know what I mean? I made a lot of mistakes on my own time and money with not theirs, and I was able to like get a baseline understanding. But I genuinely think there's a big difference between being good and being like really good, and I wanted to get to that point. And so, working with that company helped a ton. And honestly, it has completely changed the entire route of my entire life because the people that I have been surrounded by for the past 3 years are brilliant. They're so I'm the dumbest person in the room 95% of the time. They're all so so smart and I still, still work directly with them. I've learned so much about business in general just from being in this role. And so it was without a doubt one of the best decisions I've ever made.
Yeah, in the entrepreneurial world, the real estate world, we always talk about getting mentors, joining a mastermind, getting mentors, that type of stuff. You got paid by your mentors. You got a job, you got paid by your mentors. You had a mastermind every day that you went to work to get paid
That's a
to join this
yeah,
mastermind. And like you said, these are really smart people. And so you are learning from very smart people to get to the level that you want to get to. So I just yeah, I think people miss a big step that they can take. Now, not saying everybody has to do it, but it's a very powerful tool if you do it
yeah.
properly.
I mean, I've been thinking about syndications lately, right? Just for what we're doing and you run a very big syndication company. And it's like I could apply to work with a syndication company and learn the ins and outs of syndication and take all the experience from the 17 plus years you've been doing this and then take that and actually go and build my own company with it, right? Or
Yeah.
something along those lines. And I'm sure you would be totally fine with that because I help, I work
Yeah,
with
why
you,
wouldn't
you
you?
get great help, and then you go out and do your own, don't do your own thing. Like, why not, right?
Yep. Yeah,
Build
and
your,
the beautiful thing is you're learning from their mistakes too, and you're getting a peek behind truly behind the curtain that you otherwise will never see. Like even the mentor is probably not going to give you that deep of an intimate knowledge. So, all right, let's move on. I want to know. So here's what I'll tell you what I am looking to do,
yeah,
and maybe that's a model on how we can talk through this. And then there's a lot more certainly. But one of the things that I'm not looking to, and I think a lot of the listeners are like this, and there's certainly some that are wanting to grow a true business. But what I have is I've got a lot of single family rental houses. I'd like to take a couple of those, one or two of those, sell those, and buy short-term rentals in areas I enjoy being in. But I don't want short-term rentals that are just going to cost me a bunch of money. Just because I like being there doesn't mean I don't want to also make money. So that's to me is critical. Like I want to buy a place in the mountains somewhere. Okay. Perfect. But I don't want it to crush me every single month. I would love to buy a place in a warm area, buy by the beach. It doesn't need to be on the beach, but in a nicer area, warmer area on the coastline. So those are the types of things that I'm looking for. I know there's a lot of other people we'll talk about people that are truly looking to make this a business, but that's how I'm looking at things. And so trying to find that right place, um, and that can cash flow still,
Mhm.
and is not going to lose me every money every single month. That's been what's really held me back from really diving in and looking and not understanding maybe what data I need to be looking for.
Okay. So your situation is actually about 95% of the people I work with.
Yeah.
As opposed to the people who are trying to like build a business through Airbnbs, I'm mainly working with investors that are literally in your exact same situation. Um, so I'm gonna ask some questions and kind of like dig deeper into this, but I think this will make for a good conversation. I get what you're trying to do. It's also difficult to do, and for a lot of reasons. Now, let's let's start here. So, if the property were to break even, would you be okay with that?
Yes.
Okay. If it breaks even today but loses money during a recession, are you okay with that?
Hmm. That's a tough one. Um, I would prefer, of course, for it not to.
Okay.
Um, Potentially, yeah. I mean, if we're talking like, hey, this might be a little rough during a recession. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe.
Six six months to like a year, right? Is
Yeah.
pretty much how the worst case scenario. Okay. If when you go on vacation, are you okay with repairing being a handyman?
Oh my gosh, yeah. But I don't
Okay.
want to be there all the time. Just when I'm going there, right?
Okay. So you're on
Just when I'm
vacation.
scheduled to be there.
Okay. Yeah. But that would be your vacation. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally
Okay.
fine.
Cool. And does it need to be within driving distance to you or flying distance?
It needs to be in flying distance to me, but it
Okay.
needs to also be in a fairly short enough drive to either the mountain I'm going to go skiing on,
Yeah.
or and it doesn't need to be like on mountain.
Right.
I'm okay with a commute, or it needs to be, a fairly short commute to the beach as well. It doesn't need to be
Okay.
on the beach.
Perfect. That's a good mindset. Um, in the Airbnb world, um, it's very, 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 very different than long-term rentals, right? Long-term rental, fix up the kitchen, fix up the bathroom, fix up the flooring, paint the whole place, call it a day.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? You can get it rented. In the Airbnb space, especially where it's evolving to, you have to outcompete your competition as much as you possibly can to be able to secure the bookings at the nightly rate that you need to be able to create cash flow.
Mm.
So what that means is that you got to buy a property with a pool, and you have to have a really nice fire pit. You also have to have a game room. Some of these markets, you have to have a pickleball court. You also have to have a little outdoor bowling alley. You also have to have an outdoor movie theater. And essentially, what you have to do is create a mini resort so that you can get booked, right? Now, mind you, you could still get booked without all of those things. It's just your ability to profit is going to go really low. Like you're going to drop really, really quick, right? Especially in these beach markets. Mountain markets might be a little bit different because on mountain markets, there's not a lot of flat land. And so then therefore you're competing off of the home. But then when that is the case, you tend to have to buy a more expensive home to be winning, right?
Yep.
And sometimes people buy really, really, really nice homes. They don't need it cash flow, but they throw it up on Airbnb, and that's who you're going up against, and it makes it really difficult to win in those markets. Okay. So the reason I state all that is to simply ask you, let's say that you bought a $600,000 home and you put 20% down, so you're 120 down. Would you be okay putting another $120,000 into furniture, amenities, and light reno? Not necessarily redoing the bathroom, but changing the mirror, the lights, and the vanity. So, are you comfortable with putting that amount of capital towards those things, which are automatically depreciated? They don't really appreciate your
Yeah.
property
Yeah.
automatically, right? But it allows your property to cash flow. Ideally, you get all of that, recoup that money in about, 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years, and now you're, back to square one and you're profiting from there on out.
Yeah, that for me, that would be very difficult
I
to
had a feeling.
justify as I look at what I would be. So, because what I would be doing, I'm a like frugal, stingy, like I
You're a,
and I
you're a long-term rental investor. It's
right.
a
And so
lifetime
what I would
long-term
be taking
rental.
is selling something that's making me, $20,000, $30,000 a year, and then plugging that into something that's breaking even or losing money, that would be a tough sell for me. But let's just
Well,
for purposes of the conversation say, yeah, I'm
well,
great with that.
in this scenario that I'm laying out for you, where you're gonna like go all out, right? You're gonna do what's needed to win in the market that you're going into. If you hired me, if you go do it yourself, I can't promise this, but if you hired me, you should expect to make somewhere around $20,000 to $50,000 in cash flow
Hmm.
from that property if you self-manage, if you have a certain, debt in, if you have a mortgage, that your interest rate. There's certain factors that come into play, but the average
Yeah.
that we help our people with is within that range, right? So yes, you are putting up like an extra 120 into something that feels insane for long-term rental investors because like whenever you put money towards a property, it automatically ideally increases the value of the home, and maybe you can't recoup that money right away, but it's in the property and you know you haven't wasted it, right? Whereas like, okay, I just spent 20 grand on a pickleball court, right? That did not increase the value of my home. How do I feel about that? So
Yeah.
in that scenario, let's say you're making $30,000 of cash flow, $120,000 into the property. It's a 4 years before you recoup all of that cash that
Okay.
you put towards those depreciating assets.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that would probably be okay because I have plenty of properties that even though I have really no money into it anymore, I've had remortgaged it, we're all good, but I've got a lot of equity sitting there. So
Right.
when I look at the cash flow to the equity, it would be about a wash, right? I could take a lot of equity, move it into this other one. Certainly the cash on cash return isn't maybe as good, but
Mhm.
when I look at it, it's just apples to apples. We're saying, hey, I make 20 grand here, I'll make 20 grand there. So that to me would be just fine.
Okay, perfect. That we're getting there. We're getting there.
We're
The
getting
last
somewhere
question,
here, right?
yeah. The last question, which is like the end all be all,
Yeah,
right? You want to go to the beach home during the nice season. Why would you not? You're not going to go in the middle of the winter,
of
right?
course.
And guess what? That's when you're making the most amount of money. And
Yeah.
so in some of these beach markets, you're making like $25,000 in that month, which means you got 4 weeks making $20,000, which means those weeks are going for about $5,000 a week. And you want to stay there for a week with your family. Are you essentially you are paying $5,000 to now stay at that place
Yeah.
because you're taking away that money that you would have made, right? Now, mind you,
Yeah.
you don't directly feel it, but you lose $5,000 in revenue.
Yeah. Which is why I would probably want several places because then I don't feel the pressure to go to one versus the other. Then I could just say, hey, we're not getting as much this week, or it's a blank week. We're not renting
Mhm.
it. Let's go.
That happened. Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
So
Yep.
yeah, I would be totally fine with that. And the other thing I look at is you go, hey, we can have a little bit of I can't use this when I want to today, but I can use it whenever I want to in the future.
Okay. Perfect. As long as you, perfect mindset towards that because that is the reality, right? It's funny how many times I hear people tell me stories of like, yeah, I got this in one of my favorite vacation markets, and we really liked going to this place, but we never stay there because we don't want to like take away the bookings and the revenue
Yeah.
because it's business, right? And it's like, yeah, that's how it goes. And then they go and rent out like a completely different place for like half the price, and it's like, you know what I mean? The whole idea of what you want to do is now gone because you don't want to lose the revenue. So, just wanted to share like that's the reality of a lot of people's situations.
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, if you're hopping on a plane, you can go anywhere, right? That's
Yeah.
the sort of scenario there. If you're open to, spending the amount of capital that it takes to win in the Airbnb industry, you can make that work, like in what you said you did. And you said you're open to going, staying at the place if you want to, but you don't have to. And you can also stay at like the slow times. Another thing to kind of throw into that scenario, which may make you more intrigued, is that there's a site called Host Share where Airbnb hosts share their Airbnbs with each
Hmm.
other. And so you join this club, let's call it. And when you do, you give away 21 nights and you get 21 nights automatically like that, right? And now you will book people's Airbnbs when they are unbooked. So you'll find like there's one like massive home. It's literally like a mansion, but it's on the site and you can book it out and all you have to do is pay the cleaning fee. But as long as nobody else is staying there, as a host, you can then go stay at that place with your family, friends, whatever, for
Oh,
that
wow.
time period and pay the cleaning fee, just so that that host has the ability to go do it anywhere else too.
Anywhere else.
So you not only will be able to stay at your Airbnb whenever you want, but you also be able to stay at any Airbnb that you want. It's just that it has to be during the slow time, right?
Yep. That's a great perk.
Yeah, it's
You know,
cool. Cool thing.
obviously, if you can take advantage of it, you have to be able to take advantage of it. Uh, but
Yeah,
it's a great
there's a
perk.
lot of. It's not stupid simple, but it works.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
now
So it
do you
sounds
like?
like it's possible. I think
Yep.
the biggest takeaway for me out of this is today's Airbnb isn't like yesterday's maybe Airbnb. It's not like a single family rental or an apartment rental. Actually, it's probably when I look at it, it's that's where our apartment community is heading. Is it's very amenity based. We have to have things like
Mhm.
we are doing a big remodel on an apartment building right now, and we're putting in a pickleball court. We're putting in a not a hot tub, a sauna. We're putting in a cold plunge. We're putting a movie theater, right? So we're doing all these amenities for the tenants. It sounds like the same thing is needed, and maybe to a bigger extent with these short-term rentals.
Maybe bigger, maybe not, but maybe it's it's for one individual home rather than an entire apartment complex. So you get that like seclusion, right? And that privacy to those individual amenities. They're not shared, in other words. So it goes a longer way. But yeah, I mean, that is what works really well. Now, mind you, you don't have to in every single market,
Yeah.
but I've studied 350 markets. This is all I did. This is all I do, right? Is just like study this stuff. And I had to find markets for TechFester to be able to
Yep.
invest into. And so I had to study, they were like, find as many as possibly can. So I went through so many different places. And I've looked at a lot of beach markets, like a lot, like all, mainly it's Florida where everyone really wants to go because the East Coast it's just is such a short window
Yeah.
of
Such a short time.
opportunity, right? And then
Yeah.
you get to like Texas, and nobody really like loves the Texas water as much as they love the Florida water.
Yeah.
Alabama's kind of in that same boat. And then when you get over to the West Coast, forget about it, right? It's just the prices are through the roof. It's not
Prices.
prices and regulation. California is in Oregon and Washington, they're all very similar in that sense. So it really is like the mainly the Florida coast that is one of the areas to go and look into. And in those markets, it is extraordinarily competitive. Like
Yeah.
very, very, very you can't be on the water on the beach, and that the home prices are just through the roof. If you were, you're losing money, but like you're just enjoying a really beautiful asset, right? And even if you were to be, 5 blocks off the beach, that's also really, really difficult to do as well for the exact same reason. It's very difficult. And when I say that, I'm not saying that it's impossible to find a property that will cash flow. What I'm saying is that it's really, really difficult to find a property that'll cash flow between $20,000 to $50,000 a year because your debt service is going to be high, but your total rent is not going to be higher. And so the objective is always to figure out what is the lowest possible home price that I can find with the highest amount of rental demand. Like right before that cusp of where the rental demand starts to fall off or the home is not have the things that it needs to have to be able to drive revenue. So as an example, we've noticed that if you're 20 minutes away from the beach, you're okay, right? Within this like 20-minute radius, you tend to be okay. Once you get to a half an hour, you're not okay.
People don't want to drive that.
Yeah, your revenue starts to dip. It's
Mm.
harder to get the bookings. You're a little further out of Airbnb's like circle of recommendations, right? And so it makes it more difficult. So obviously, the closer you are, the better. But there is sort of this like range of like, okay, well, what if I'm like 15 minutes away, and the homes that are 15 minutes away can sometimes be a lot cheaper, but they still have the exact same amount of demand as the ones that are like 5 minutes away, right?
Mm.
And then what you want to do is you look at the home and you want to make sure that the home has what I call revenue drivers. So as an example, backyards are always like the easiest ones to think of. A lot of homes are built where the pool is the entire backyard. That's all you get, right?
Yep.
Well, if I'm in competition with you, I'm then going to go find a backyard that is gigantic and throw a pickleball court in there and a whole bunch of other amenities. And now you only have a pool to offer, but I have a pool, pickleball court, bowling alley, jungle gym, mini putt and fire pit, right? I got all these different things, but you only have this, and there's no way for you to beat me because you're not just going to go buy the neighbor's backyards to expand your backyard to compete with me.
Yeah.
So therefore, I'll beat you forever because of that reason, right? And that gives you a moat around your Airbnb. So you have to look for those things where the price point is right not too far away from the destination, and your property has the revenue drivers that can allow you to be able to hit the revenue numbers that you need to be able to hit to drive the profit that you want to make. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Right. Yeah. And, when I look at when we rent, I mean, one of the things that I will not, when we're going to the mountains to go skiing, like it's got to have a hot tub. It just has to, because after we're done skiing, we want to sit in the hot tub. We
Yeah.
just are going to. And so I'm not going to rent there unless it has, like, that's the must have amenity
In a mountain town, yes. So
in a
what you
mountain
just
town.
said is so crucial, and a lot of people don't think the way that you just thought. I'm going to relate this to software. Okay. So like when software engineers are building software, they're always looking and watching people use their software to see how they use it. And where do they go? What buttons do they click? Where do they go from here to there to there? They're constantly trying to figure out like where are you going and how are you using it? And I relate that logic to Airbnb because when I go on vacation and I'm staying at an Airbnb with all my friends, I got a group of about 10 of us to there's more than us now. And when we book out an Airbnb, I watch how we use the Airbnb. I watch my friends like where are they going? What are they doing now? How are they doing? You know what I mean? Like how are the groups splitting up? Why are they splitting up? And I'm trying to like think of it because if I can understand what they're doing, I can then create an Airbnb that creates those activities better than the Airbnb I'm currently in. And so what you just explained is like this idea of like, yeah, we just finished snowboarding all day. I want to sit in the hot tub and have a drink, right? With everybody. That sounds like a great way to end the day. Well, what about before that, right? What about when you just got back from the mountain? And I don't know if you have kids, but let's say you got a handful of kids, right? And the kids are a lot less tired than you are, right? Because they're kids. And the game room is in the
Oh yeah,
living.
that'd be huge.
But what if the game room's in the living room, but it's right beside the kitchen, and you're trying to cook, but the kids are
Yep.
like screaming their heads off,
Outside.
continuing to play. But what if that game room is now downstairs,
Yep.
away from you, and they can keep playing down there while you and your wife or whatever are taking care of everything upstairs. Now you get this like moment of break. You can recharge, and then you're headed to the hot tub out, dinner, then hot tub, and a movie to end off the night, right?
That's really
The
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, if you think about it, how is it going to be used? You create this space to create the experience that then people will uh, enjoy, right?
We were just at not just, but we were at an Airbnb not that long ago. It was great, great space. It had a hot tub, but it had a garage that was heated, but there's no way you're going to use it because everybody that's there that's driving's got a roof rack on their vehicle. They can't get in the garage. They're going to park it outside, right? Very few people are going to park in that garage. Um, why not utilize that space as that exact game room that you're just talking about? That would have been a
Yeah,
perfect space for that.
that's very common nowadays. That is a lot
Yeah.
more common than it was 2 years ago. We look for that all the time. That's
Yeah.
sort of like a little secret, but I'll share here. So like I remember, there's this one market that we used to look into, and 5 bedrooms was the only thing that would work, and it drove me nuts because there were no 5 bedrooms for sale
Mm,
ever. There was only 3 or 4 bedrooms. But now, when we look at a house, we'll go look at a 3 bedroom, we'll go look at a 2 bedroom, we'll figure out, we go, okay, how can we turn this into a 5 bedroom, right?
mm.
Okay, well, we have a 2 car garage. Perfect. There's 2 bedrooms, right? And you enclose a garage. Yes, you lose the garage, but it's actually more valuable to have more bedrooms than it is to have a garage.
Yeah.
And as long as it, which means you are appreciating the property, depending on the market, right? By doing that investment. So that's like a direct investment that, creates more equity. But what I'm trying to say is that when we look for properties, we do look at smaller ones and we figure out, can we make it a bigger one? Because sometimes in some markets you need the bigger one, and garages are the easiest and fastest ways to do that.
How do you determine, like, if I'm looking at a market and I go, well, you know what, we could buy this. We could just we're okay with a one or two bedroom place. Um, we're okay with it, but does it mean the market's okay with it? Like, what's better? Is more bedrooms better? Is less bedrooms more profitable? Like, what's the better
So, yeah,
product?
great question. When you go away, and it's you, do you have a wife?
Yep, wife
You
and
and
two
your wife
kids.
and 2 kids. Okay, so when you guys go away, the four of you, would you prefer to stay in a hotel or a one-bedroom Airbnb?
Oh, Airbnb.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we don't like the hotels because then, you got the two beds next. It's just,
Yes.
yeah.
So what about you and your wife? just you and your wife are going away, hotel or one bedroom Airbnb?
Um, I think we're probably going for convenience, and it depends on where we're going, but
Yeah, good
um,
point.
yeah, kind of
So
depends on where we're going.
my handle is the Airbnb Data Guy, and when I go travel by myself, I will stay at a hotel every single time
Yeah,
because
probably we do more often than not.
yeah,
We're going to stay at a hotel if it's just two of us. But if it's the whole family, we not that we never go to a hotel, but we would much prefer a one or even two bedroom Airbnb for sure.
yeah,
And actually, at
so,
this point in time, we've got a 11, almost basically a 12-year-old and a 16-year-old, and it's a boy and a girl. They
so
don't
probably
want
even
to
a three
stay.
bedroom.
They don't want to stay in the same bed. So it's got to
Yeah,
be. It can't have just two beds.
right.
It can have two bedrooms,
But it's got to have
but
three beds,
it's got to have a bunk bed. It's got to have something. They
pull-out
can't stay in
couch.
the same bed.
Yeah. So you're answering the question, right? When you are saying, we're okay with staying in like a one bedroom, and should we go for a one bedroom or not? Uh, what I've been trying to what I've realized is that Airbnb gets a lot of hate. And a lot of people are like frustrated with Airbnb for a ton of different reasons. And I think Airbnb is just trying to find its footing. Like, where does it fit within the marketplace across the United States? Like, what works, what doesn't? And what happens is you have this free market of people opening up Airbnbs wherever they want, whenever they want, however they want. And some work and some don't, right? And some piss people off and some don't. And so what I think is happening is that Airbnb is kind of evolving to a point where people realize like when they really would want to use it, when they wouldn't want to use it. And so then the hosts are realizing this as well, and they're determining, okay, I'm going to open up an Airbnb based off of what makes more logical sense for when somebody's booking an Airbnb compared to when they're going to book a hotel or
Yeah,
you get the idea, right?
yeah,
So uh, I always keep that in mind when I'm thinking about this because I don't want to go up against a hotel ever. I think hotels are better. I genuinely think I hate the unknown process of what it's going to be like to go into a one bedroom Airbnb.
yeah,
When I'm going with 5+ people, or sorry, like 10 people, uh, Airbnb every single time, we'll go from there
yeah.
because it's just, I love the communal
Well,
part
who
of it.
wants who wants to be in a bunch of different rooms, right? Like,
Exactly.
unless you're just crashing quickly.
Correct.
You're driving late at night and you got to crash somewhere. Sure, you're gonna just throw your head
Yeah.
in a hotel. But
Another
yeah,
great example of, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, that was my thought. Yeah, I mean, you got to like the hotel. The nice thing about the hotel, especially if it's like you said, it's you or just you and your spouse, it's you know what you're gonna get. It's quick and it's easy. It's convenient.
Mhm.
It's got free breakfast. Like
Yep. Parking
just
is easy
simple.
to figure out. You
Yeah.
talk to somebody when you check in. Now here's to flip the whole thing is that I'm strongly considering buying a one bedroom
Hmm.
like this week, but it is a unique looking A-frame that is out in
Mm.
the middle of nowhere on 4 acres, 2 hours away from a city. So
Experience.
it's an experience, it's a retreat, it's a
Yeah.
recharge, it's a whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. You
It's
can't
one
you can't get a hotel there. It is not competing with a hotel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is where it's like, when people say, well, would they be okay with the one bedroom? It's like, it depends. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It truly does depend. Because you could even take it a step further. Like, anyways, I can go into more examples,
But
but
if
we
there's
can,
a hotel nearby and it's just a spot, like I could see why that wouldn't be a good investment.
yeah, there's a lot of people. Are you familiar with the rental arbitrage model? I really,
Yeah, I mean, you go ahead and explain it. So, because I don't know if our listeners fully understand it. And I heard you say it, and that was actually a question I wrote down as you were
okay,
giving your introduction. So, why not arbitrage? Because that
okay.
was the big thing
Yeah.
not that long ago. Like everybody wanted to do arbitrage. I would get phone calls. We would get phone calls,
Window
people
it.
wanting to rent my place and arbitrage it. And I'm like, yeah, no, don't go away.
Yeah. I unfortunately was one of those people at one point, but so I apologize.
I probably told you no.
Apologize on behalf.
Yeah.
But arbitrage it's simple. You have an apartment building, right? I want to rent out 10 of those units and turn them all into Airbnbs. I will pay you rent and then I will furnish them and then put them up on Airbnb and rent them to other people. I'm paying you $20,000 a year. I have other expenses. Hopefully I can make $40,000 a year and walk away with some profit per unit. That's it, right? That's the gist of it. The reason I don't recommend it is because it's a god awful business model. Like if you think about the fundamentals of business, it's just not a good business model.
Yeah.
You have no control over the asset and you take on all of the risk, right? So you at any point in time where you're just over it, I mean, like there's squatters' rights and all these kind of things, but really like you can cancel that lease if you really need to. And so then therefore, as me, the person who's trying to build a rental arbitrage business, I'm at the mercy of you at all times. And I'm not gaining any equity when I make these rent payments or anything along those lines.
Yep.
But then on top of that, I do have to pay the rent, which is an expense. I have to pay the utilities, I have to pay the cleaners, I have to pay all these different things. And that's a higher level of risk. And then even more on top of that, I have to buy, almost everybody buys brand new furniture to furnish the entire thing,
Hmm.
which is worth next to zero as soon as I purchase it,
Yep.
right?
The first
And
time somebody
so
sits on that couch, it's
as soon as you
ridiculous.
buy it, it doesn't even, you know what I mean? You don't have to sit on it. As soon as you hit the credit card, it's worth $0. Like it's worth half the amount when you try and sell it on Facebook, right? So, you know, the money you have to spend, it automatically turns into almost nothing. You're taking on all the risk and you're building no equity and you're at the whim of the landlord. And so if I'm trying to build up in a huge business where this is what I'm doing, I've got no long-term play, right? I'm not like you have all the equity from the syndications that are building up every single day, right?
Yep.
Whereas I'm not getting any of that. I may get some cash flow, but that's only if I can make more than the amount that I'm paying. And then if anything goes wrong, recession or COVID hits you, and all of those bookings go away, you're still at the risk of every single last one of those expenses that you have to cover. And for myself, when I was first getting into the whole real estate world, rental arbitrage was the thing that was promoted to me. I was excited about it. I'm like, okay, I can do this. I know next to nothing about real estate and everything in the world. So I'm learning and I get roped into doing this and I do it. I open up 8 of them and then COVID hits and, I think it was like $35,000 that month with zero revenue, right?
Wow.
That'll freak out anybody.
Wow.
With that being said, what I also realized through this time period, or through that period of doing that, was property management, right? Which may sound very silly because property management is a pretty straightforward thing, but when it comes to Airbnbs, I just didn't know about it at the time. And I had a landlord come up to me and say, "Hey, I've got another unit. I'll furnish it if you just manage it and take 20% of the revenue." And I was like, "Hold on. I don't have to pay for the furniture, so I'm getting in this for $0. I'm not taking any of the risk, so you know what I mean? Like I'm risk free. I don't have to pay for anything. And every single dollar you make, I take 20% of it. And all I have to do is do the exact same thing that I'm currently doing with all my other units. I was like, well, duh, right? And I never got another rental arbitrage. Well, I guess I did, but it was in a different city. But anyways, from there on out, I was like, all about property
Yeah.
management. I was like, just property management, that's a business in my opinion, because you can sell those contracts because they're sellable, right?
Yep.
People will gobble those up. And the more you get, the more they're worth and all these kind of things. So um, that's why I'm against rental arbitrage and why property management is a significantly better model. Uh, but the reason I brought that all up was to say that a lot of people were doing rental arbitrage as one bedrooms in apartments. Like that was a very, very big thing. A lot of those businesses went under during COVID. But even people who are still doing it to this day, they actually look for two-bedroom places and they try to actually look for a little bit more luxury places instead of the rundown cheap ones,
Hmm.
because it is a different option that is better than a hotel. So no,
Yeah.
they're no longer competing against hotels with the worst product. They now have a completely different thing that allows them to stand out and get booked at a different rate altogether. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And
Yeah.
that arbitrage. I mean, the biggest thing I would be worried about is that if you get yourself into a 1 year lease, I don't know if you're locking in for 2 3 year leases, but man, if you're only in a 1 year lease and you get that lease pulled on you after a year, you spent all that money on amenities. You probably finally started making money towards the end of that first year, like truly started making money. Maybe you didn't even because it takes you a while to pay all that furniture off. And boy, that lease gets pulled. You spent a lot of time and effort to make nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can talk about that.
It happened.
It happened. I've got horror stories. But that honestly, I would rather not talk about rental
Yeah.
arbitrage
Why
because
do why
yeah.
do most people fail? Let's not talk about arbitrage because we've
But
already said that. But why do most people like fail or just really struggle? Is there commonalities between those who you say, man, Yeah, I understand why you're just struggling because of XYZ. What are those things?
It's one thing. It's one thing. I'm convinced it's one thing. I may be biased, but it's one thing. But before I explain the one thing, I'm going to ask you some questions. Maybe it'll lead to that,
Okay.
right? So, you've never gotten an Airbnb, but I'm sure you're concerned about managing, right?
Yeah, oh,
You're
yeah.
concerned about like how am I going to clean this place?
Yeah.
You may also be concerned about like how do I message these guests and things like that, right? Now, let's say you have an Airbnb and it's your very first person that comes through and you do an absolutely terrible job. You know, they're stuck at the door, you didn't give them the door code, you were doing something else, you took 2 hours to get back to them, they're locked out of the place for 2 hours. Then they get into the house and it's actually not as clean as it should be for whatever reason. And you know, then the AC stops working. Like, all these things sort of happen, and they just have a really, 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 really bad experience, right? The next time somebody shows up, you're probably going to be on top of your phone a little bit better. It would have been cleaned a little bit more thoroughly and the AC would have been fixed, right?
Yep.
That right there is super easy to fix, right? Now, should you be over concerned about your ability to host if it's that easy to fix? Probably not,
Probably
right?
not.
Yeah. Same with pricing. Like, what should I price my Airbnb at? Should it be $100 a night or $200 a night? Again, very easy to kind of figure out and make that happen.
Yeah.
And
Adjust that
so,
as you go.
exactly, right? And you'll figure it out essentially. Like if you put time towards it, you'll figure it out, but you'll be okay. The main thing that people worry about are those things. They worry about how am I going to manage this, how am I going to do it, and all they really think about is like, okay, my lender said I can buy up to a $600,000 home, and I like this vacation spot because I can go snowboarding. And so now let's go find a $600,000 home in my favorite vacation market. That is the most common thing that happens because like I want to use it, you know, I've got the money to invest. I hear online that Airbnb cash flows, and I'm going to go and you know buy one of these properties. Well, what they didn't do is they didn't go and look at every single other four bedroom because let's say the six, you know, the home they bought with the four was a four bedroom. They didn't look at every other four bedroom within that market and understand every single last thing that their competitors were providing, how they were providing it, what it looked like, and how they were marketing and delivering that property. They didn't do that. And if they did do that, they would have known exactly what they would have to add to their property to be competitive. And then on top of that, they would have also known how much revenue they could have expected if they did X, Y, and Z. And so the main mistake is that people don't do that. And then they put a listing up. It's inferior in comparison to all the competition. Me as an Airbnb guest going to look for a home and I've got, you know, $1,000 to spend, it would make 0 cents for me to spend $1,000 on their listing in comparison to the other options. You know,
Right.
you wouldn't buy a shitty car if you had the option to buy a better car for the exact same amount of dollars. You just would never do it, especially if they're side by sides served up on a silver platter in a software to your computer and you can very easily choose one or the other,
Yep.
right? And so that is hands down the biggest mistake is that people do not study the data. They do not study their competition. They don't understand what the true revenue potential is of the home. They don't know how to beat their competition within the market, and they over worry about very easy things to solve once the property's up and running.
Hmm. That's that's interesting. What's the more valuable thing in Airbnb? Is it to have the highest price possible, or is it to have the most amount of bookings possible? Like, what's more valuable?
Higher price.
Higher price.
Yeah. Um, the real answer is like you kind of you want both,
You want
right?
both,
But
certainly.
yeah, but at the same time, you know, I was actually talking to somebody about this today. There's a person out in Dubai who has a high-end luxury condo that is like super duper luxury, like it's ultra, and his prices are so ridiculously high that I'm pretty sure his occupancy is around 20%, but he makes like I don't know the exact numbers, but it's a like tens and tens of thousands of dollars in profit from that property because when people book it out, they pay a ridiculous amount for it and it covers the expenses and he makes a ton of profit from it. And
Yeah.
so in that case, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The nightly rate's more important. And I always tell people, they're like, well, I want to make sure that I have, you know, really high occupancy. I go, okay, lower your prices. And you can have 100% occupancy if you make it $0 a night,
Yeah.
right? So like occupancy isn't that big of it doesn't matter that much, I guess is what I'm trying to say. But um, when
Well,
you're,
when
yeah,
you're
sorry, go
adding expenses every time you rent that out too, right? I mean, you got to it's got to get cleaned and maintenance and those
Yeah.
types of things. Utilities end up going higher for that period of time. So you're adding expenses. So it certainly makes a lot of sense that price is probably number one. Obviously, you want high occupancy. You don't want to have it so high that it only gets rented out 3 times a year because you're way overpriced. But that would make sense. I would rather give up a little bit of occupancy to gain on the price. So
Yeah, but with that being said, I think it's the wrong way of thinking about it. And a lot of people are always worried about like what should my nightly rate be and what should my occupancy be. But I don't think that's the way that you should think about it. Instead, what you should do is think about how much annual revenue is my competition making. Okay?
mm,
Because the reality is that your nightly rate is going to be all over the place and your occupancy is also going to be all over the place depending on peak season and low season. And I always like to give this example. When I had properties in Chicago, on a Saturday night in July, it would go for $1,500. Like that's how much the night would go for. The 2 days prior on Thursday, it would go for $300,
hmm.
right? The reason being is because the demand was significantly lower on a Thursday compared to a Saturday.
Yeah, it's
And
somebody that's in town for business versus vacation.
exactly. Right. And so it makes more sense to stare at an Airbnb as this, what is the annual revenue potential based off of what all the other people are doing? And maybe a good example for this, I always use this analogy. Your Airbnb is like a product, okay? And you just happen to sell it in over 365 days. But let's use a bag of chips. So if I had a bag of Doritos, okay, and it's going for $5, that's how much that's worth. But then there's the no-name brand, that like knockoff cheap version, right?
Hmm.
That's going to go for 250,
Hmm.
right? Your Airbnb is very similar. If your Airbnb is the Doritos, then as long as you price it properly and competitively against all the other Doritos that are kind of in that same category, you should realistically be able to sell it for $5. But if you're this no-name brand, you're selling it for 250, right? And if you're a no-name brand and you try to price yourself at the same as a
Yeah,
Doritos at $5, that's where your occupancy falls apart,
yeah,
right? And then if you're a Doritos and you price yourself at 250, your occupancy is going to go through the roof, but you're losing so much revenue that you could have made,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And that's the reality of Airbnbs. They're products that they can make a certain amount of money over a certain year if you look at it that way rather than on a nightly basis.
John, I got one more question about this. What got a recession potentially coming up? We've been talking about recession for forever, right?
Yeah.
We obviously had one that affected Airbnb with the COVID. How do you? A lot of people are scared to buy something if we've got a recession coming. How do you be successful in spite of that?
Yeah. So I think about this a lot. I went through COVID, right? So I went through COVID and had Airbnb business wiped out, but yet I'm still in the Airbnb business. And
Yeah,
so,
good
it's
for
on my
you, by the
mind.
way.
Appreciate it. It's on my mind at all times. And I've been trying to think of a way to avoid this. And obviously, working with the investment fund, we invested like $80 million. Like it was a ridiculous amount of other people's money that I'm in charge of saying where it should go. Like
Yeah.
at least one of the leaders giving my opinion, right? And one of the bigger ones because I have the data to say like, yeah, this is the property that makes sense. And so I don't take that lightly. And
Yeah.
I'm always trying to think like, how can we get through a recession? Because that's truly the worst case scenario. It's not anything else. Like that's the worst case scenario, especially when
Yeah.
you have 150 properties and all of a sudden you're not making enough revenue to cover the expenses across the board on all those properties. But here's my logic. Okay, here's my theory. It will be tested one of these days. Um, when a recession happens, people do not get hit the exact same way. Some people get hit worse than others. And so majority of people do get hurt, but there's still a good portion of people that have funds and incomes and can still travel, right?
Mhm.
And we saw that in COVID, we went through 2008. I used to be a financial advisor, I studied this stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so logically then there will still be people going to those markets. But let's say there was 1,000 people going before, now there's only 100. And that means that those 100 people are still going to book out an Airbnb. How do you be the Airbnb that they book out? Okay. And it comes back to the same idea of what is everything, what my competition, what is every single last thing that my competition has? What are they doing? How are they doing it? And how could I take all of that and be the best possible option in the market? So that if there were 1,000 people traveling before, but now there's only 100, well, those 100 people would be willing to book my place over yours.
Yeah.
And if I then have to lower my price to the exact same as yours, then I will get booked and you will not. Right. And at least I'll have some money coming through to help cover some of the bills. We won't be cash flowing like crazy, but it's enough to carry us through the 6 months to, a year and a half of trouble until we get to what's right after every single recession, the boom, right? And the boom is the best possible time to own assets. And so if we can just hold it and get it through that point, then we'll go from there. So the strategy is trying to always be within the top 10 percentile of your market so that when travel dies, you can still get booked. But you have to know what your competition has and doesn't have to be able to beat them. And you need the capital to be able to do that in very competitive markets.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's a good answer. All right, John, got a couple last questions, then we'll wrap up. What is a favorite book that you can recommend to our listeners?
Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
It's a fun book. It's an interesting book, and it's got a lot of realities in it as well. Certainly
Yes.
a story, a fictional story, and a
That
very
feels
long
very
book.
real.
But yeah,
It feels very real.
it feels too real sometimes
Yes, it does.
when you read it. But a good book. All right. So last question here. What are your three pillars of wealth creation?
So you let me know that this question was coming, so I had some time to think about it. But I'm going to give you the exact same answer I gave you right at the beginning. It is family first. I used to travel a lot. I used to always hate living in my hometown, and so I was always trying to figure out where else to go, where else I wanted to live. Do I want to live by the mountains? Do I want to live in like a beautiful place, whatever it may be? And what I found out is that people are more important than every other thing in the world. And so being by family, being by friends, that is the best thing on this earth. Um, so that's my first one. Then actual money. My theory is, make money in business and invest in real estate. And so I heard that from somebody else, loved it. And so those are my other two pillars of wealth creation.
Love it. Make money and invest it in real estate.
Exactly.
Sweet. Family,
Yeah.
money, real estate. John, really appreciate you. Appreciate the time. How can our listeners get in touch with you? Talk to you about, well, first of all, I we talked a lot about Airbnb. We didn't really, I mean, we talked a little bit about your business. Give me a little, just a quick, why should somebody reach out to you? Um, what kind of value can you add to them? What's your business all about, and why should they reach out to you? And then give us the contact for people to reach out.
Okay. My business is an Airbnb data consulting business. We have created free educational information that you can use to be able to find profitable properties. As long as you go through the information, you'll be able to find profitable properties and not make a mistake. However, if you do not want to do that, you have the option to hire us. And you can hire us, and we will point you in the direction of a property that has the potential to be a strong cash flowing, profitable Airbnb anywhere across the United States. And that's how we built up the business. The company is called STR Search. What I recommend is just go straight to the website, take a look at our free courses, see if it's for you. And if it's not, you'll know exactly how to reach out to us from the website. You can also find all of our other media that's on there, all of our other resources, all of our other information. It's all right on the website. And I can't recommend it enough. You have to understand the data to be able to be good at Airbnb. And so that's the place to start if you are interested in Airbnbs.
How does your site and what you do differ from like an, let's call it an Air DNA or something like that?
AirDNA is the software that we use to be able to identify properties. The question is, how do I use AirDNA in the most effective way to ensure I'm getting a good property? And that's what our resources, our site, our free training will teach you how to do so that you can then go out there and find the profitable property.
Love it. John, really appreciate you. I appreciate the time, the value you've added. Anything else you want to add to the listeners?
I really enjoyed this conversation. Like genuinely really enjoyed it. Usually people always ask me a ton of questions on like Airbnb data and how to do this and how to do that, but I love picking apart your situation and try to make sense of it. And it sounds like you need an Airbnb. So why don't you reach out? We can
Perfect. I
go
know
there.
exactly who to call.
Yeah,
John, again, appreciate you. You have a fantastic rest of the day.
you too.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. I appreciate you being a loyal listener. Say, I would love to have you go on to our Facebook page and subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Go on to iTunes or wherever you listen and give us a rating and review. Don't forget to subscribe. Your rating and review just helps us push this out to more and more people and continue to grow our audience and hopefully positively affect a ton of people out there that really need this and want this. So the other thing I've got for you is a free ebook on my website. So go on to venturedproperties.com, venturedproperties.com, and download our free ebook on real estate and on syndication. And I've got some data points in there, some really good stuff for you. So I'd love to have you take a look at that. It's free. I'm not expecting anything from it. And also, look, if you want some help in multifamily, want some help learning, growing, getting your business off the ground, I would love to talk to you about what it would look like to work with me potentially and see if that's a good fit. So you can go to coachwithdex.com and check that out. And we can definitely have a call. Thanks a lot for listening. You make it a fantastic rest of the day. I'll catch you on the next episode.